Reading some adapted scenes from the short story Bat Outta Hell, and I'll be starting at the opening scene, so there shouldn't be any need for context. But I would like to offer a trigger warning for family and sexual abuse. This is Bat Outta Hell. The sound of Jay's new motorcycle found me like a fury. It was faint at first, rumbling like a storm drunk on the horizon, and then I saw him slingshot around the corner, bringing all that noise with him. He hung a sharp left and revved the bike before he skid to a stop on the street in front of our house. I was already standing on the sidewalk. I could feel the heat and noise radiating off the bike like a small sun. Jay revved it and everything exploded. Those savage pops and cracks, the metal gurgle of pipe, all of it looped around my lungs, twisted around my gut and groin. It filled me up and rattled me, made me want to yell at it, growl at it, throw myself into its hot, cracking core. He revved it again and all the trees and leaves, all the brick bungalows and sidewalks lining the asphalt shimmered, threatening to shake loose their rough surfaces and show us the dark stuff the world was really made of. "Get that shit off my property," my grandma yelled from the top of the porch stoop, but we could barely hear her. My uncle revved the bike again and again to spite her. The more he did it, the more I wanted to try it myself, to twist the handle and release the wild animal of that noise. And then he shut it off. The silence pushed in on my ears, made me dizzy. All the other sounds on the street hunkered low in the twilight. Jay unclicked his helmet and pulled it off. He shook his head, and his wavy black hair fell to his shoulders. His slender eyebrows were pulled into his scowl. He had high cheekbones and a sharp nose that made him seem meaner than he knew how to be. The few hairs he could grow on his face were trimmed into a neat goatee. "Jesus Christ," my grandma said, "still in bikes now?" Jay got off the bike in one slick motion, flipped his hair behind his shoulders with a gloved hand. He wore mirrored sunglasses, even though the sun was long gone. "I bought it, yeah." "Bought it?" my grandma yelled. "You don't have any fucking money, what'd you buy it with?" "None ya," he said, and rolled the motorcycle down the long driveway to the shed at the back of the house. I looked up at my grandma on the porch. One of her arms was folded beneath her breasts, the other holding a cigarette expelling tight curls of smoke. Her anger bristled and then turned to ember as she mumbled curses to herself. I could still feel the wake of heat from the bike on my bared chest. "Fucking sick, huh?" he asked me in the shed. It was a Harley Davidson, apple red, with a wide leather seat and fringes on the seams. "Who'd you get it from?" We were both stretched in the gleam of the chrome. I was Jay's twin in every way except for the hair. I kept mine buzzed close to my scalp and couldn't grow anything on my face. And I was taller than him those days by a couple inches. "None ya." He grinned white teeth at me and then rubbed my stomach because there was no one else in the shed. Then he put the helmet in one of the lock boxes and pulled his hair behind his head. He pulled out a rag from the bin on the shed floor and started rubbing the bike like he was trying to rub away another color underneath all that red. "Give me a beer." I had been living with my grandma and Jay for a year before he got that bike. I was 16. My mom said it was a temporary thing, me living with my grams in shithole Pueblo, Colorado, while she went to go find work in Cali, but I knew it was bullshit, and it eventually turned into the rest of my time in high school. Jay was my mom's younger brother, my uncle, but we were so close in age, I dropped the T.O. from T.O.J. when I was 12, and never called him anything but Jay since. He was 6 years older than me, but my grandma said you wouldn't be able to tell. That fucking mistake. See how he mooches, mijo? She'd be out on her porch, halfway through a 12-pack of bud during these confessions, and I'd be out there too, sitting on a ghetto-ass crate right next to her luxury lawn chair. Coming into my house when he's not shooting up or getting trashed, thinking he owns all this shit. "Don't be him, my sweet Julian," she'd say, and I'd watch her take another puff. We had to wait until my grams fell asleep before he could take me out for a ride. "Go change your fucking sandals," he said to me on the porch. I had my sketch pad out and was trying to draw Jay's bike from memory, and put on a damn t-shirt. When I came back out, he was holding a sketch pad. "I want you to design a tattoo for me." He tossed me the sketchbook. "I want that." I looked down at my rough sketch. "How long would it take you?" "Not long if I focused." Jay disappeared around the house to the shed and then rolled the bike out from the driveway. I waited for him out on the street, and he handed me his helmet. "We're just going around the block." He got on, and then I got on, and when he kick-started the motorcycle to life, I felt my balls shoot up into my chest. All that metal felt intent on cleaving my bones from my skin, shaking me until all that was left was that core part that nobody saw, that part you didn't want anyone to see, not even when you were looking in the mirror. When he kicked off from the asphalt and revved up the speed, I felt like I was riding his rage. I clung on to Jay, half expecting to fall over the edge of the world with nothing to grab onto except a fistful of stars and the blackness that fell with you forever. That night, he took off his shirt and showed me where he wanted the tattoo, right below Al Crucifixion. I stared at his back, which was already half covered in tangles of dark ink. Roses and brass knuckles took up one shoulder blade, and the Virgin Mary took up the other. I looked at the bare spot on his lower back, just beneath the stylized blood drops from the nailed feet of Jesus. "Touch it," he said, "so I know you know where I'm talking about." And I did, because I always did what Jay said. When I first moved in with my Grams, I was an angry little fuck. I missed an entire year of school, got arrested for tagging the big-ass wall of the community center with some other boys the world forgot. I even called my Grams a bitch one night, but she slapped that shit right out of my mouth like a tooth. And I spent the night crying from the pain and from the shame, and if I'm being real, from the fear of losing the one person who would deal with my shit. I pictured being like those fuckers on Grant Street, thrown out of their homes and looking for families and crack pipes and broken syringes. She tamed me right up with that one slap, and since then, I do whatever she said, no matter how embarrassing or crazed. But after a while, Jay tamed me too, with darker shit. "This is what I do whenever I get so fucking sick of myself," he'd say to me in some stranger's basement, and then he'd take a hit of something, and the world would turn purple and pink and gold, and he'd live somewhere like a king for a couple hours, and I'd have to drag him home and lay him out on the dirty futon in his room that smelled like weed and cheap cologne. He did some hard shit. Mostly, I just got high in my bedroom, and I'd read or draw like some fucking nerd. Harder nights, I'd stare into the popcorn ceiling and listen to Prince from some old albums my mom left me before she ditched me, and replay some of the images of her before she left. See, I had this fear of forgetting her face, of one day when I was grown and out of the house and walking on the street, I'd run into my mom and not even know it was her. When people asked me about my dad, I pretended that I gave up on that fucker a long time ago. But when I was high, I used to do this stupid game where I'd create memories that weren't even true. Sometimes they were based on real memories, like this one where I'd picture my mom and my dad taking me to McDonald's, and they'd let me get a Happy Meal. My dad would ask the lady behind the counter for the other toys we saw on the posters, so I'd have the full collection of the action figures. He said he'd pay extra, and then he did, and then we'd stay and eat inside the restaurant, which meant that I got to go play in the playground with the slides that used to shock the shit out of me, or the ball pit that always smelled like dirty socks. Like I said, this was a real memory, or a series of real memories, but in real life, instead of my dad, it was just preteen Jay, already looking grown. A couple days later, Jay showed up with his bike at my school during lunch. I heard it before I saw it. "Want to go for a ride?" he asked without turning off the bike. I saw myself reflected in his sunglasses. We took the interstate towards the mountains. I didn't have a jacket, and the higher up we got, the more snot streamed out of my face. Jay finally pulled over at the rest stop that doubled as a scenic overlook. "Cold as fuck," I said, and I tucked my arms into my t-shirt. Jay didn't seem to mind the air. We both sat on a bench by the bike. I shivered and he smoked. The sun looked bright and hot, but the wind kept swiping away any chance of me feeling it. It didn't help that the trees had already turned into a fire blaze of their own. I thought about my sketchbook, wanted to go home. Jay finished his cigarette and flipped the butt onto the asphalt. He stood up and stretched his arms behind him. I got up and leaned over the seat of the bike, resting my chest on my forearms and elbows. The leather seat was warm from the sun. "Want to see something?" he asked. Jay unzipped his jacket without waiting for my response. He threw it on the back of the bike and turned around. He took his wife beater by opposite ends at his hips and in one motion pulled off the shirt. "Check it out." There was a square patch of gauze spanning the width of his lower back. Black ink or dry blood dotted the bandage like black stars on a white sky. "Go ahead, peel it off, take a look." I came around from the other side of the bike and pulled the tape from two corners and then opened the bandage like a door. "So what do you think?" It was the motorcycle tattoo, but not the one I sketched for him. This was done by a professional artist who probably saw the shit Jay brought into him from me and laughed his fucking head off, and then went ahead and drew what was now permanently on Jay's back. It looked better than anything I could ever do. "Did it hurt?" I asked. "Yeah, like hell. Took a shit ton of time too. Had to go back twice. See the inscription though at the bottom?" I peered down at the small of his back where the skin dimpled above the gray band of his underwear. In scrolling calligraphy were my initials. My thumb floated over the letters, but I didn't touch him. "Sick man." I closed the bandage. We got back on the interstate and I tried my best not to push into the small of his back as we descended from the mountain.